The best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fine?
You think you've seen the sun, but you ain't seen it shine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. It's time for another commentary. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
And finally, after months and months and months, we are getting back to Star Trek. Sarah and I did Wrath of Khan back just before Darkness came out, in preparation for
all
that.
All those months ago.
You know, just with this kind of assumption that maybe Khan might be in that movie, just like those, you know, just on the off chance that ended up being a Khan. Just on the off chance that...
odds?
Just on the off chance that it was Star Trek 2, Khan into Darkness. And so now we're finally getting to Star Trek 3, and sorry for the long hiatus on this. Sarah and I are finally back to this and hoping to knock these out in somewhat rapid succession. We're going to do our level best to try to knock these out at least before our next baby's born. That's our big...
At least sometime before we die.
That's our big plan. No. I want to do it before, you know, and I know, Sarah, that these movies are about both life and death. And I'm hoping that we can make it more of a positive experience and have more of a glass half full sort of mentality, really. So no, before our next child is born, not before either of us slowly decompose. So anyway, or get shot out into space in a torpedo.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, well, the first part maybe, but then you're not thinking about the potential consequences.
Probably not.
Yeah. So anyway, speaking of consequences, now we're going to talk about Star Trek 3, and if you are going to watch the film with us, as I always say, we try to give you plenty of context as we're talking about the film while we're watching it, so that this is as much of a podcast as it is a commentary. So theoretically, you should be able to listen to us talking about this film without watching the movie. It's not just going to be a commentary track, but we're also going to have a discussion all the way through, over every second of the film. And if you do want to watch the film with us, certainly get out your DVD or your Blu-ray or your Netflix. Go grab your Netflix
with two hands.
Yeah, go grab your Netflix off your shelf and rig up everything past the menus. Get it to timestamp 0 and press pause and get ready to start with us. So press play as soon as I say now. Sarah, where does this one fall for you?
I'd say this is in the top half for me. I actually like this one a lot.
Cool. So you're not dreading doing this?
No, this is one of the few I really enjoy putting in the player. So. And
those of you that haven't listened to us talk about Star Trek a whole lot, you may not realize that when Sarah says that, it's not because she's not a huge Star Trek fan, because after all, she is one of the Trek-spirits, but she simply likes Star Trek a lot more on television than she does on film.
Much. I think they do a much better job in the TV series than on the big screen.
Well, we'll talk about some of the reasons that you like this one more, and some of the ways in which, and I agree with you that this film gets us a little bit kind of back to the spirit of the show. So we'll talk about all that and more. Go ahead and get your movie ready if you haven't done that yet, and then hit play right now.
Hey, it's a mountain.
There's always a mountain.
Oh, yeah.
You always get the Paramount Mountain. It's only in Star Trek V that there's a mountain and then someone's climbing it.
Go climb a rock.
Go climb a rock. So I think it's appropriate that we open this film watching this scene again. And kind of interesting that it's in this kind of weird letterbox thing.
Yeah. I think it's just to catch everybody up in case they didn't see the important parts. Because this movie is such a direct sequel to Wrath of Khan that if you didn't see Wrath of Khan,
you'd be completely lost.
You wouldn't enjoy this movie at all.
But yeah, I wonder what the reasoning was for starting that tiny little box and then zoom in on it.
Yeah. It's weird. And it's all blue.
Yeah, well, it's because it's a sad moment, Sarah.
But it wasn't blue in Wrath of Khan.
It's a very blue moment. Well, it's true, but it's a flashback sort of thing, right? You know, you use some kind of stylistic other sort of color scheme to denote the fact that it happened in the past.
Yeah, we know this isn't part of this movie.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the prologue, kind of.
Oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that before. It goes from that blue thing, and then it gets colored.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that before.
How did I never notice that? That's really interesting. So I think what they're doing is they're getting us from past to present. It starts off as a flashback, and then it says, okay, the movie has actually started now. Yeah. And now what we're seeing is still from Wrath of Khan. This is the end of Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's still catching up the viewers, and also reminding everybody that's seen it before, because keep in mind that it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan came out in
82,
and I guess they rushed this out for 84. Yeah.
So it hasn't been too long. I really like his Spock's intro in this. I think he does a good job reading all that.
Yeah, I like that too. It's very dramatic. The way that Leonard Nimoy chose to do that is almost creepy. But I mean, like, I don't know. That's not the right word for it.
Yeah, there's a sense of waiting. Something is coming.
Yeah, there's a sense of mystery to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that really is linearly the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. It's that got shot off. I mean, his casket gets shot off. Time passes, and what happens now? Nice bit of trivia there. It's a Mark 6 torpedo, sir. So Harv Bennett swears up and down. Harv Bennett being the one of the major producers for this and Wrath of Khan, and helped write the stories for both. He's credited as the sole, by the way, the sole writer for this film, but Leonard Nimoy, uncredited, helped him with a lot of it. And anyway, he swears up and down that they did not intentionally set up a way for Spock to come back at the end of Wrath of Khan. And I find that so difficult to believe.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's always said that. Leonard Nimoy has I think, always backed him up on it. But I have a really hard time buying that you would have Spock mind meld with McCoy just before he dies and not be thinking, this is our way out.
Yeah.
Like, why would you even have the foresight to do that if you weren't planning to do something with it?
And also, he gets shot down to a weird, crazy, science-y planet that nobody knows anything about its properties at all.
Yeah.
And so anything could happen.
It's all there. And you ended Wrath of Khan with this idea of possibilities. And anything can happen. We're left with that feeling. Well, Harv Bennett, in an interview, said that those were the three, everything we just talked about, those were the three things that he had to work with at the beginning of this to figure out how to bring Spock back. And he said, it was amazing. It's all laying out there right in front of me. And he said 17 other people could have just as easily written this movie.
Yeah.
And I just have a hard time with the notion that he didn't set those dominoes up at all on purpose. Yeah. I mean, maybe having one of those elements,
possible, I suppose,
but all three of them.
Yeah, it's just, that's either a run of really good luck, or, he had something in the back of his head.
Do you think that it's at all a cheat? And I'm not saying this because I think this, but do you think it's at all a cheat to kill off a huge character like Spock in Wrath of Khan, to do this really daring move like that, and then bring him back in the very next film?
I don't know. I wouldn't say. I think these days, when it's so typical to kill people off and bring them right back, I think of it now as kind of a cheat, where you build up to this big thing and then
you make it a big gimmick to sell tickets.
Yeah, but I don't get the
not
feeling...
even to sell tickets, because people didn't. Well, I guess people actually did kind of know with Wrath of Khan, but they weren't supposed to. So yeah, anyway.
I just don't get the feeling that that was what was going on here. I think they took advantage of, let's kill off a major character. People are going to really get emotionally invested in this. And it was a real death. Yeah. And it wasn't a cheat, and they didn't bring him back at the end of it. There was no magic triple blood. Yeah. But I think, with Nimoy wanting to come back again, or being willing to come back again, I think bringing him back in the very next film, it just makes sense. Because if you leave him too long, then bringing him back just feels kind of, I don't know, just weird. It feels more contrived somehow.
Yeah, like we've gotten used to the world without him, and he's almost intruding on it now.
Yeah.
Well, what I think makes it work is that it's a film about friendship.
Yeah.
And it's a film about what you do for your friends and the lengths that you would go and the losses that you're willing to incur in order to in order to save your friend.
Yeah, the relationships really work. They come through in this film, in the script, and the themes especially really pull through.
Yeah, I think that you really hit on something when you said that they take advantage. They take full advantage of that idea. It's not a gimmick because they explore all of the inherent interesting ideas that would come from that resurrection. Importantly, it isn't just Spock comes back to life because he's Spock and he's popular and he has to come back to life. He comes back because Kirk goes and gets him.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about Kirk.
Yeah. Yeah, if Kirk hadn't gone back for him, then I mean, that planet was unstable. Spock would have died again.
He would have died again, exactly. And also remember that he was aging with the planet.
Yeah.
So if he hadn't been pulled off the planet, he wouldn't have just died. Importantly, he wouldn't have just died because the planet was going to explode. He would have died because he would have aged too much.
Yeah.
I think.
That's the sense I get.
And so it's kind of interesting that if they hadn't gone back, nobody would have ever even thought about it, you know? So like, it wouldn't have... It's sort of like if a tree falls and nobody's there to hear it, did the tree really fall? Yeah. It wouldn't matter that he was still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So how much do you love Christopher Lloyd in this in the role of Kruge?
It's a great performance. I love this character. He's just so fun to watch on screen.
Now, you and I have always pronounced it Kruge. It's pronounced Kruge sometimes in the movie. Is it always pronounced Kruge? Have we just been saying it wrong this whole time, Sarah?
We'll have to watch.
Because Valkyrie says Kruge.
I noticed that last time we watched, but I forgot to listen for it later.
I am a big fan of the sound effect of the Klingon ships decloaking in these movies.
Uh-huh.
I just like how incredibly 80s synthesized it is.
Yeah.
It's very video game.
Yeah.
I really like it. And here comes our first appearance of what is probably a Targ.
Yeah.
Now, we're not told that. We don't know that for sure in this movie. And the first appearance of an actual Targ is like first season TNG, or is it second?
It's when Q makes it appear.
That's what I thought it was.
I think it's second, isn't it? But I can't quite remember.
I thought Q made the Targ appear in Haydn Q.
Yes.
That's first season. That's a second appearance,
okay.
Yeah. So Christopher Lloyd has a fantastic delivery of the Klingon language.
Yeah.
He is probably one of, if not the most impeccable delivering Klingon speakers. And Sarah, and I'm saying that as someone that has studied the language a little bit.
Yeah.
You've spent a lot more time with it than I have.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. It really feels like he cared about making the role realistic.
Is this the first appearance of a Klingon female? Or was there one anywhere in TOS?
There was one in TOS.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I always forget.
Can you tell me where it was?
Yeah, it was the. I love that episode, but I can never remember the title of it. It's the one where the Klingons are on the ship, the same ship with the Enterprise, and
that explosion looks pretty good for 84 guys.
And they're all fighting.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not right away coming to me either, but oh, that Tark's cool looking.
Yeah.
So I was feed him.
Feed him your hand.
I was born in 1984. I was born the year this movie came out. Lots of great movies in 1984. And the special effects, we're talking 29 years later, the special effects hold up great in this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty movie.
There are a lot of firsts in this movie. This is the first time that we see a space station that looks like that. Mm-hmm. And that is the basic design for a lot of the space stations we see later. When you get to TNG and DS9, a lot of space stations that kind of look like that.
Yeah.
And all the movies after this kind of have that look.
Mm-hmm.
Kruge, or Kruge, is referred to all over this as my lord. He is a Klingon lord of some kind. That is a title that is never given to another Klingon ever again, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
That is new. There is still an attempt at re-envisioning this race going on.
Yeah. Well,
And
there was a major overhaul between the original series and motion picture.
Motion picture, yeah.
And then it looks like they're continuing to develop it, and they finally do even more with that in TNG, and then through DS9 they continue to develop.
I would say that they're already getting us closer and closer to the TNG Klingons with Kruge here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things start with him.
Yeah.
And I think that he is incredibly underrated as both in importance and in menace. I think he's a wonderful villain.
Yeah.
The problem is he had to follow Khan. And anybody that follows Khan, because he was so incredibly popular, and because, especially these days, when we look back on this in retrospect, nobody talks about Kruge.
Well, nobody talks about Search for Spock. I mean,
That's
this is kind of a forgotten movie, for the most part.
And unfairly.
Yeah, it's great, but it's the sequel to in my opinion, the best Star Trek film.
And in most people's opinion, and if you look at 2, 3, and 4 as a trilogy, which you should, this is the darkest of the three.
Uh-huh.
And most of the best trilogies are done that way. This is something that Red Letter Media talks about a lot, and I've always agreed with him. And it's something that we studied in writing school. That your second act, that's where all of the conflict happens. That's where all the conflict is developed. That's where the confrontation happens.
Yeah.
And so any of the big important darkness that's in your story should be there. So if you look at a trilogy as a first, second, and third act, the roughest stuff should happen right in the middle. That's where your character should be
of the plot.
Most challenged.
Yeah.
And we don't think of it like that because Wrath of Khan feels like the darkest of them because it's the one we remember the most.
Yeah.
We forget about some of the stuff that happens here. We forget that Kirk loses his son.
Yeah.
We forget that we forget that Kirk becomes a fugitive and steals the Enterprise and almost gives up his entire career. He doesn't get it back until he goes back in time and conveniently saves the whole planet, right?
Yeah.
He had to do that in order to get that back. So we forget that this is the one where they lose the Enterprise. I mean, it's all about loss. And of course, so is the first one.
Yeah.
But it all happens at the end of that. I mean, in a lot of ways, it
starts out as kind of this.
That's your first act. It's your setup
upbeat, and it's kind of a setup film, but it's a complete story.
Now, what we're about to see here is incredibly eerie.
Yeah.
When the first time you see this movie and you hear Spock's voice here, it's wonderfully chilling.
Yeah.
And this really is going to be Nimoy's voice saying, "Jim, help me." And it's coming from McCoy.
Uh-huh.
Now, for a long time, I couldn't decide if that was actually Leonard Nimoy or if it was DeForest Kelley, but it is Nimoy.
Okay.
I have done some research and confirmed it, but also, if you listen really closely, it's unmistakably Nimoy.
Yeah. It's always hard to tell voices in a whisper, but yeah.
What helps is Kelly's performance here, because he's speaking in exactly the same kind of inflections, and he's got his vocal range in the same part of his voice.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of eerie whisper.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of Vulcan lore here. I think it's interesting to note that we're developing Klingon and Vulcan lore simultaneously here. There's a lot of new stuff here for Vulcans. The idea of the Katra, I don't think, was really an idea before this.
I don't think so.
Mount Seleya may have been mentioned somewhere, but I think that might even originate here. And of course, well, no, because Mount Seleya was in TAS.
Oh, really?
Was it not? Or am I
don't remember.
See, there's a lot of stuff that with like the fire planes and all of that. I just can't remember if that was in there or not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I forgot. I'll have to look it up. I'll look it up while we're talking. I just don't remember. Enterprise throws me off.
Yes.
Because Mount Soleil is an Enterprise.
Yes.
And that's a prequel, and it just kind of throws me off a little bit. This is also the introduction to the Excelsior, which as a class becomes very important.
Yeah.
And will soon, here in a little bit, lead to the single most amusing sound effect choice in all of Star Trek. We'll talk about that
Yes.
when we get there.
Indeed.
So Scotty is gonna go over to the Excelsior and have to be their engineer, and we're seeing that everybody is about to have to get split off. I like that we're smart enough here. Bennett is making sure to build on those ideas from Wrath of Khan of getting older and change.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's got to be a hard blow to the crew of the Enterprise to have to be broken up like this.
Especially after everything that they've been through.
Yeah.
Now, I have a bit of a nitpick here, and that is that the Enterprise cannot be only 20 years old.
Yeah.
This admiral tells us that it's only... By the way, this admiral's great. We'll see him later talking to Kirk in a bar and telling him that... denying his request to go to the Genesis planet. And he puts in a fantastic performance. But anyway, when you count in Robert April, and you count in Pike, and what all the stuff that went on with the Telosians and Pike and Spock, and then the fact that the Enterprise had a 5-year mission under Kirk, and then have these movies, I really don't think that it can only be 20 years old. I did some math on this, and it's at least like 28 or 30.
Yeah.
I wish I had those numbers in front of me, because I a few weeks ago I did some research on this, and now I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Yeah,
I forgot to...
They must have just thrown out a number there.
It seems like they just threw out a number.
Yeah.
There is a book called the Star Trek Compendium, written by Alan Asherman back in the mid-'80s. Mid-'80s to late 90s, and I'll check and see what exact date this is. And it's been updated a couple of times. Okay, this would have been around 89. Yeah, because this came out right after Star Trek V. And anyway, Alan Asherman brings up a really interesting point that I had never thought of before, which is that Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock parallel The Cage and Menagerie in very interesting ways. And this is an analysis that I would have never considered. He says that he brings up the biggest thing is that Kirk is putting his whole career on the line and his life on the line to go back and rescue Spock in precisely the same way that Spock did with Pike. And I think, and you could even go a lot further with this analysis, which he didn't, which is to say that Talos and Genesis are both forbidden planets.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that is not a connection I would have made.
I think that's really fascinating.
That's really interesting.
Also, both are major follow-ups to big starts of something.
Yeah.
And I mean, like there's a lot of really interesting potential analysis there between those two things.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish Asherman had gone a little bit farther with it.
Yeah.
He brings up a few interesting things in that book, but
Yeah.
I started
He
thinking about it, and I was like,
continued
there's even
going
more
through.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
And the themes are the same. The idea of rules are less important than my friendship with this person.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. And I think it's really cool that Kirk does that for Spock.
Yeah.
And I think it's really subtle. You gotta wonder if they were thinking of that or if it happened by happy accident.
Yeah.
Because it actually makes this even a better film when you think about the fact that it's following up those very ideas. It doesn't seem to be just kind of a cool coincidence. Those very ideas are furthered from Menagerie.
Yeah. Day of the Dove.
There it is.
That's the name of that Klingon episode I was thinking of.
Sarah, how do you feel on the whole about David Marcus as a character?
I was never a huge fan. I like him better now than I did when I first started watching him in these films. He's kind of grown on me, but I think he's kind of... My lack of regard for his character is kind of why I never really bought Kirk's...
In 6?
Yeah, Kirk in 6 going crazy over the death of his son. Because in my mind, well, I didn't like David Marcus anyway, so who would really care about, him dying? But Kirk only knew him for a couple months, if that.
And so he comes off almost just as a plot device where, like, Kirk's gotta hate the Klingons for some reason.
Yeah. So,
But that's not to say that that's not built up here.
No.
Because, of course, Kirk has a lot of reasons to not like the Klingons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, the more I watch this, the more it all makes sense in my brain.
Well,
but...
yeah, because my counter to that would be that part of the reason that he's so torn up about it is because he didn't get a chance to get to know his son, and that some of it is self-berating.
Uh-huh.
In that he hates that he wasn't there to see his son grow up.
Yeah.
And he and his son finally reconciled, and they wanted to have a relationship, and the Klingons took all that away from him. So I would argue that it's worse for Kirk than if they had gotten to spend
more time
any
together.
amount of time together.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
And so then the question, it just becomes, did we get to know the character enough to care that he died outside of just, it's Kirk's son and Kirk lost something?
Yeah.
Because at that point, it could be Kirk losing anything.
Yeah.
It could be the Klingons took away my those glasses that Bones gave me. It wouldn't matter what it was.
Yeah.
So to a degree, we do have to kind of care a little bit.
Yeah.
These non-Starfleet clothes they're wearing are hilarious.
Yeah, well, but non-Starfleet clothes, civilian clothes,
thank you.
are
That's what
hilarious in Star
Just
Trek
in general?
everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I can remember seeing any that are actually good.
I would argue that it works better in Enterprise once they just start putting on regular people clothes.
Yeah.
Because they're in Enterprise they're trying to say that like things haven't changed so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the first appearance of Sarek since Journey to Babel. Mm-hmm. And how cool is it that they even thought to do this?
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, like, we take it for granted now, being Star Trek fans, used to seeing Mark Lenard in this role a handful of times. But if you think about it, it makes this inherently a sequel to Journey to Babel and a follow-up. It borrows things from that. But we're going back to something that only happened one time in a 79 episode Star Trek series. Series. The people making this have regard for the continuity and for the history, and that's great.
Yeah.
And it's good for fans and non-fans alike, because Spock just died. He needs family that mourns him, and isn't it great that we have that in Sarek?
Yeah, and they pulled on something we already had instead of just making up something different. Just because, it's a movie, so things need to be bigger and better and more different.
I love the mystical lore with the Vulcans and how they don't like to talk to outsiders about it. Mm-hmm. Sarek is really worked up here, and Kirk is like, you're a Vulcan. I don't understand. I mean, I know your son died, but wow, I've never seen this kind of explosiveness from a Vulcan before. He says, you should have gone with him to Vulcan because he asked you to. Yeah. And that's because he knows that if Spock could get close enough to someone, he would have been smart enough to pass his contra off to somebody. Yeah. But he's not telling Kirk what he knows.
Kirk has no idea. Yeah, Kirk's totally confused.
Because it's an internal matter. It's a family matter. And what Sarek doesn't know yet, what he doesn't have with Kirk yet, is that Spock and Kirk are as close family as Spock and his father are. And in fact, more so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why now he's going to mind meld with him. But I mean, like, I think it's really cool that he doesn't want to. You get the sense that he doesn't really want to talk about it, but he has to.
Yeah, well, it's something that's so important to Vulcans that he has to talk about, because he has to get to the bottom of it and return Spock's Katra. But he doesn't want to talk about it with outsiders.
I've always enjoyed the inherent juxtaposition of a race that is all about logic that is so spiritual. Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely fascinating. It's an inherent contradiction that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
It really makes them a distinct race, a distinct culture, and they're very three-dimensional. as a culture.
Now listen to how Mark Leonard delivers these lines here. It's interesting how much I'm talking about vocal range right now. He has lifted his voice up about half an octave.
He sounds more like Spock.
And he sounds more like Spock. Because Mark Leonard has an inherently baritone voice, and Leonard Nimoy has something a little bit closer to a tenor.
Yeah, and Mark Leonard is one of the most awesome actors ever.
I love Mark Leonard. Always have. Now, this is not the first time that Mark Leonard has reprised this role, even though it's only in the canon the one time. He also voiced Sarek back in the one animated series episode about the Vulcans, Yesteryear.
Yeah.
And this is a really sad moment because they have no idea that Spock passed his katra off to somebody else.
Yeah.
Mark Leonard, even though, it's been a good, 68, 78, like 20 years, maybe 17, 18 years since he last was on screen in this role, he still looks really young to me here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, compared to what he was in the 80s and in
TNG. Well, this is the 80s, but you mean later, yeah.
Later 80s.
Mark Leonard, I'm sure we've said this in other shows before, is one of the only actors that has played that has played the three big major Star Trek races.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was the first Vulcan. I mean, not the first Vulcan, the first Romulan.
He was the first Romulan.
Yeah.
And he's been a Klingon.
Yeah.
Do you know where he was a Klingon?
No.
Motion picture.
Ah.
That is Mark Leonard.
Okay.
In the dullest Klingon ship moving across space scene you've ever seen. They want you to be hanging on that like a hawk. Like, oh man, when's it finally gonna come totally onto screen?
Yeah.
So, do we just record every inch of the ship at all times? Is that what we do?
It seems to be, yeah. I guess it's like security footage in a department store now or something, where you have cameras set up in key locations.
Now, the only problem with that, of course, is that you have that silly TV movie thing that you always have, which is we just use the footage that we shot in the first place as security footage. Yeah. So the camera moves with them.
Thing about,
and I guess the security camera knows
Star Trek
that
sensor cameras.
McCoy is the important part of this because it zooms in on him as he drops.
Yeah, well, but that's why you can look out in space and there's a floating camera out there somewhere and you can look back at the ship.
Oh, okay. We've seen this a lot in TNG and other things, but especially TNG, early TNG, where you'll have what's supposed to be security footage or just ship footage. Well, actually, there was a lot of this in TOS too, and like there was some of this in Court Martial, I think. And you'll have, you'll have a camera that will like pan. Oh, I think there was some of this even in Arena. You'll have a camera that pans and shows us exactly what we want to see, even though we wouldn't know we wanted to see it yet because the instance isn't over. Like you would have to have it in retrospect to know what the important events were that you were going to move the camera around on.
Now that's AI.
Yeah, that's the only possible explanation. Yeah, artificial intuition. That's what that is. I think the science ship is interesting. The design of it, the Grissom, it looks a little bit like the Excelsior, except of course it's a lot smaller. And like the Excelsior looks like almost a cross between the Constitution class and that thing. And so you can see this evolution of ship design.
Yeah.
Throughout, which is cool.
Yeah. Ew.
Yeah, those are gross. Those. And these are the giant microbes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, obviously not as gross as the SETI eel things, but...
I don't know.
And that's pretty gross?
Yeah.
Giant microbes kind of creep you out?
Yeah, well, those are like...
Yeah. They look like...
snails?
Yeah, they look like snails, yeah.
Like, I don't know, snail shrimp?
Snail shrimp.
Yeah.
Tell your friends. That sounds gross. So, this is...
clothes are all folded up.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to wonder exactly how his clothes got folded. I didn't think of that.
And the weird thing is that it looks folded in that shot, but then when they back
pick
off
it
to
up.
pick it up,
It's not.
It's not.
Oh, okay. So they kind of messed that up.
I can't tell if it's supposed to be folded or
Well,
not.
they should be tattered, right? Like, because he's been growing with the evolution of the planet. So the planet is aging rapidly. Spock is aging rapidly.
Yeah, but he starts out as a kid.
Right, but he wouldn't... Well, you're right. He could have just crawled out of the clothes, I guess, and gotten onto the ground and ran off or something.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have done that as a baby. He would have been bigger before that finally happened.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You're right. Maybe they wouldn't be tattered. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah. But how old would he have needed to be before you could lift the lid of that torpedo?
See, that's a really good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably at least 7 or 8.
And can you breathe in one of those?
That's a really good question too. Yeah, certainly you wouldn't have thought to put air holes in it. In fact, if you put air holes in it, it probably wouldn't work right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you'd have what do you call it? A containment breach. So here's that scene I was talking about with this admiral. By the way, I like that we're doing some different things with the uniforms. So we got that red uniform that we started with Wrath of Khan. He's got something akin to that like landing party jacket that Picard had in Darmok.
Darmok, yeah.
And I think that's really cool. I've never seen anybody cosplay that jacket. That needs to happen. That is cool.
Well, it's a cool jacket. No, I really like the red uniform look.
I know, I love it too, and I'm glad that they kept it for all 6 films because it's just it's very flattering. It looks military. It looks naval. We talked about all this with Wrath of Khan. When I really like Shatner's delivery of "I had to try."
Yeah.
He does a really good job of making it look to that admiral. Yeah, okay. I guess I've lost.
Yeah.
And then he does precisely what you would think he would do and what you want him to do.
Yeah.
Which is the word is given. They said no. I am therefore going anyway. And I love that line.
Yeah.
Holographic fighter planes just does not look as futuristic today as it did back then.
No, it really doesn't.
Here's our first appearance of the Tribbles since the Tribbles episode again in TAS. A lot of TAS in this.
Yeah.
I think is it this movie where we'll see a cat person, or is it not till 4 that we finally see a cat person?
I think it's 4.
I think there's one in 6 too, but I think that there's one in the audience for Kirk's
trial or
deposition or whatever
yeah.
at the end of 4.
Yeah.
Right next to an Andorian. Right next to an elderly Andorian. They get a lot of good comedy mileage out of McCoy's having Spock's Katra in his head. It's a wonderful, ironic thing that they do a great job of playing up.
Yeah.
That, they never got along, and McCoy is almost racist against the Vulcans, and so for Spock to have his Katra in his head, and for him to have to feel like what it's like to be Spock, and for it to look like it's driving him mad.
It's no wonder
I love
he's
that.
going crazy, because, I mean, him with Spock in his head would just drive him nuts.
Yeah.
It's so at odds with how he actually is. And I love this alien and how he talks. It's just funny.
The weird kind of inverted word order thing.
Yeah.
And where McCoy tries to talk like him, kind of. Yeah, that's kind of fun.
Because he gets frustrated.
I like that we get to see how the galaxy at large doesn't have the peaceful altruistic stance that Starfleet does. We see the kind of gritty criminal element here, which I don't think we've seen a lot of, or at least not the way that they're portraying it
not
here.
Not really, not yet.
I think that Harv Bennett and Nicholas Meyer and Leonard Nimoy all together between these two films had a Genesis allowed is not. I think those 3 guys together did a really good job of inserting these kind of darker, more gritty elements, but still made it Star Trek. Mm-hmm. They still managed to keep the human elements. The comedy is still there. It doesn't get too heavy, but it gets just heavy enough.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's still optimistic overall.
I like his credentials. That's really funny. So McCoy trying to nerve pinch this guy is a nice touch.
I would think that he'd know how to do it, though. Or maybe you just have to be a Vulcan to be strong enough.
I think that's it. I never thought about it like that before. Maybe that's what it is, because we rarely ever see anyone of another species do it.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple instances in Star Trek where somebody else is able to do it because a Vulcan taught them to,
yeah.
But I don't know that humans have ever done it. I'd have to look that up and see if there's an instance I'm not thinking of.
Yeah.
I think that down here with the snow on the Genesis planet, I think all this looks pretty good.
Yeah.
They do a pretty good job with the matte paintings and the foreground sets.
Oh, and especially since they have to change climate so much down on the Genesis planet. They just go from climate to climate to climate, all right next to each other, and they're just walking through rainforest to snow to whatever.
I think one of the reasons that people don't generally... By the way, this is the funniest scene in the entire thing. when Kirk does the Vulcan symbol and says how many fingers am I holding up. But anyway, I think a lot of people don't remember this as fondly as Wrath of Khan and don't highly regard it in general, partly because it's not your general, the crews on the ship traveling through space.
Yeah.
A lot of it doesn't take place on the ship. And I mean, it will, but I mean, like, very briefly, and then suddenly we're down on another planet and stuff, and it... Like, I'm not saying it doesn't feel like Star Trek. It's in space.
Yeah.
It's about spacey things. It's about science fiction. You know, the science fiction ideas are there. We're still dealing with Genesis, but it's a heist movie.
Yeah.
In the first act anyway. And by the way, in my research, I discovered that originally a lot of these scenes were cut up with other things in between them. So all the heist stuff didn't all come together in a package like it does in the final film, and they re-edited it in order to in quoting Leonard Nimoy, he said it just flowed better this way.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly was in. They didn't cut a lot of stuff. They just reordered some things. I think maybe more of the Genesis stuff was actually in between all of this, and they put a little bit of the Genesis stuff in there. But there was even more of it. I guess he said that they kept interrupting themselves.
No, I'm glad they took that out, because I really like all the heist stuff together and getting it. It's just kind of a big story happening.
Yeah, and it's fun to get to see all of our characters doing this kind of duplicitous stuff. This is stuff we don't get to see them do very much.
Yeah.
And it's fun because the audience is validating it because of why they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, any other circumstance where Kirk is stealing the ship and running off, you wouldn't, almost anything else, you wouldn't buy it. It's hard to make this. So this situation should be a really cool, fun, big deal, because to contrive something where we like our characters and we believe that this is what they should be doing, that this is the right thing to do, is not easy. And they've managed it here.
Yeah. Yeah, and it ends up being something like Star Trek Mission Impossible. I like the feel of it.
Yeah, except that, like, they're the bad guys.
Yeah. Except everyone's rooting for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost more of an A-team sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because they're going against the...
They're going against the rules, the law.
Yeah.
But it's for a good cause. I really like Uhura's rapport with this guy. This guy's such a jerk at the beginning, and then she turns the tables on him.
Everybody gets something to do in this, with maybe the exception of Chekhov, who really doesn't get anything in the movies until you get 4.
Yeah. And then he gets nuclear vessels.
And that's and that's mostly played for comedy. Well, I mean, there he at least gets to be somebody that they need to go rescue.
Yeah. Yep.
The street clothes look a little bit better in this scene. I kind of like Kirk in a leather jacket.
Yeah.
Or something leather jacket-y. So yeah, what a surreal thing to see our characters having to steal the Enterprise.
Yeah. And it's so fun how they go about doing it. Just every single scene that they put together of how they, make this part work, how they make that part work, get everyone out, get everyone together and on the ship. I mean, they just put so much fun into it.
Okay, never mind. I hate that jacket.
You don't like the collar.
Now that I'm looking at the collar, that is just ridiculous.
Oh, I don't know. It's not that.
And then what is Chekhov wearing, man? He looks like
he's wearing a suit.
Yeah, but the top part is out of the 17th century.
Yeah.
That is just strange.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll stop talking about superficial things like the costuming. So, they make that stuff a lot lighter, but not annoyingly so.
Yeah.
Not nauseatingly so. By having all of the espionage stuff be kind of fun, and you get to see our characters be really clever. And again, it works because of the motivations. Their intentions are good.
Yeah.
And because, when we started this, I said that this is a movie about consequences. Kirk knows how this is going to end.
Yeah. And it actually does end with him basically giving up his career. Like you said, until 4.
Isn't it interesting? I never thought about this until you said that. Isn't it interesting that 2, we lose Spock. He's really dead. Mm-hmm. And then in 3, there's a real good reason that he comes back and there are consequences involved. In 4, in 3, at the end of this, Kirk, for all intents and purposes, we can be pretty sure is going to lose his career.
Yeah.
His career is the thing that is dead, and he sacrificed that for Spock. In 4, it comes back.
Yep.
Now, I don't know that it's in as organic a way as Spock was brought back, but isn't it interesting that in a very roundabout way, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home could also be called Star Trek IV: The Search for Reuniting Spock or Kirk with his captaincy.
No, it's Star Trek IV: The Search for Whales.
Yeah, right. Because ultimately, obviously, it's not about that. Kirk is not. I'm mostly making a joke and also saying that it's interesting the things that are sacrificed and the things that are regained.
Yeah.
But in 4, importantly, Kirk's motivation is not in getting his captaincy back. It's about saving the world. That's it. That's all he cares about. He would have been perfectly happy with going back to Earth and facing the music, and that's what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And I will say that in that, and we'll talk about this when we do that movie, but in that movie, it's a bit more contrived.
Yeah.
That the Earth just happens to get messed up by this probe as Kirk is going to go back to get court-martialed.
Yeah.
It's a little easy. The universe is sort of coalescing to Kirk's will because he's Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
And so the reason Kirk doesn't believe in the no-win scenario is that there is no such thing as long as your name is James T. Kirk.
Right. Well, and time travel stories are almost always contrived.
Well, certainly. But there, it's not because of the time travel.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is it's the timing. That could have been anything, Sarah. That doesn't have to be time travel. That could have been the Klingons are attacking. That could have been some other natural disaster. It could have been anything.
Yeah. No, true.
So, it's kind of neat watching these movies in succession. That we've got a different kind of disembarking scene going on each time, where we have the majesty of the Enterprise and getting to see it in space on the big screen again, and it's always made a big deal of because it's a huge, whopping, amazing special effect with models. It's just a lot more impressive than it is these days.
Yeah.
And so we're reminded of that spirit of adventure and why we're here in the first place, and how amazing it would be if we really have the technology to do this. And the optimism of the future, and all those sorts of things are inside of that idea, or inside of that. The first movie, we lived there for about 55 minutes, because it sure feels like it.
Oh, yes.
Because it's the first time we've gotten to see it in forever, and because it looks so much better on the big screen.
Yeah.
In Wrath of Khan, they cut that by a quarter.
Yeah.
And they make it just as majestic, and it's the same kind of scene.
But it's as long as it should have been in the first place.
And here, we get it again, but they're stealing the ship, so the connotation is entirely different.
Yeah, it's not, oh, cool, here's the ship. It's, hey, they're stealing the ship.
And here is the absolute silliest sound effect ever in a Star Trek movie. When the Excelsior, they try to go to transwarp, which we'll talk about transwarp in a minute, because that's weird. They try to go to transwarp, which is supposed to be a lot faster than warp, somehow. And I love that this says, good morning, Captain. I love that. Is it morning? I don't know. I guess it would be morning. Anyway, so they're trying to go to transwarp. Oh, here it comes. There it is. And yeah, that's great. So Scotty has sabotaged it, and it sounds like a car out of the 1920s.
Yeah, it's just breaking down.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't run on gasoline. Why would it sound like that? That is cartoony, Sarah. Yeah. And in fact, I invoked that a couple minutes earlier because there's a sound effect before that I thought was almost as silly, and then I forgot. No, that's where it is, and it's even like they go way over the top with that.
Yeah. No, I think they must have gone through an archive of files that were called Stuff Breaking Down, and they just happened to choose that one.
It's pretty hilarious. So I want to know what transwarp really is.
Yeah.
Because in really Voyager it's different.
Yeah.
And isn't it weird too, Sarah, that Voyager is the only series that ever goes back and talks about anything to do with the Excelsior?
Yeah.
But then a season later they do transwarp drive.
Yeah.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
So in Voyager, if you don't know, transwarp, this is in a really awful episode called Threshold that is so bad that even the writer Brandon Braga wanted to decanonicize it. That said that if you can make the ship go to warp 10, and this is why you always see 9.9 infinitum, but you can never get to 10. Usually you see like 9.9798. If you could go to 10, and the reason you can't go to 10 is because it's impossible. You would be at every point in the universe at the same time.
Yeah.
And that it is physically impossible to do that. But Tom Paris, because Neelix says something that sparks his mind and makes it work, is able to do this. That's what transwarp is supposed to be. But the Excelsior has a transwarp drive. So transwarp in this is something different from that. Yeah. And something you can actually accomplish. But I guess is supposed to either go a lot faster than warp or be some other sort of warp, some other sort of propulsion. It's not explained in the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know by the movies necessarily what their top warp speed is. I know it's not like Voyager where it's
not 10.
Whatever. Yeah.
I think even by this point we've already eliminated that whole 11 to 30 thing we had in TAS or whatever.
Yeah. But it could be that transwarp is the way they got it. Maybe they were thinking in their heads that if you go warp drive, you've got this glass ceiling of we can only get it to go this fast, this much warp. And then transwarp, we got around that. And so now we can go warp 8 or warp 9. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, sure, yeah.
But maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know.
But I think even in TOS we could, like even if you look at what the math was supposed to be, I think even in TOS we could go to at least 8.5 to 9.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Anyway, obviously we're not as into the science aspect of Star Trek.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna ask you this question, Sarah.
Okay.
Saavik, Kirstie Alley, Robin Curtis. Go.
I have no idea. I like them both.
You don't care?
I don't care. They're both Saavik to me.
Do you feel like it's the same performance?
Pretty much. Yeah, I have a hard time really comparing, contrasting, because they're, in my mind, they're just kind of the same.
I understand why that jump-started Kirstie Alley's career. I think she did fine. I think she understood how to make a Vulcan feel like a Vulcan. But I feel like Robin Curtis brings a certain innocence to it that's building on that performance and making her a little bit... She's still Vulcan, but she seems a little bit more fully realized to me. Kirstie Alley's performance, she seems, she's got a lot of good dialogue in the script, but the actress seems to be a little bit, I don't know, wooden's not the right word, but kind of emotionally unavailable. I know it's a Vulcan, But you got to be able to tell in the performance that Vulcans are capable of emotion, they just suppress them.
Yeah.
I think Curtis does that better. That's all I'm saying. Now, part of that could be the material she's given versus the material that Kirstie Alley got. By the way, the reason she was recast was because Kirstie Alley got a little bit too big for her britches. Keep in mind that was her first role. That was introducing Kirstie Alley.
Sure.
And she asked for an extraordinary sum of money to come back.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't give it to her, so they just immediately recast her, and Robin Curtis took it. I've met Robin Curtis in person. She's a really cool lady, and I wish she'd gotten a lot more to do after this.
Yeah.
And I wish that she had been in more Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfortunate that Saavik didn't, that nothing was done with her later.
Yeah.
I
always
think
wanted
that
her to come
she
back.
could have very easily been integrated into Star Trek V. I think that it's fair that they didn't have her go back in time in Star Trek IV, because I think that could have made things a lot more complicated in a not-so-good way. You wouldn't have wanted 2 Vulcans on the planet, or on Earth in the 80s, and have to do, the silly headband thing with 2 of them, so...
She would have worn a hat.
She would have had to stay...
Or a scarf.
Yeah, she would have had to stay on the ship, probably.
Yeah.
And so I understand why they didn't do that, but why not bring her back again later?
Yeah.
Robin Curtis, and we'll talk about it when we do the movie, gets a cameo at the beginning of 4, but then we never see her again. And... Again, we'll get to this when we get to 6, but famously, Valeris was supposed to be Saavik. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I'm glad she wasn't, because I wouldn't want to see Valeris, or I wouldn't want to see Saavik thrown into the bus like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But on the other hand, Valeris just comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
And
why is Spock so enamored with her?
Yeah.
In her abilities and stuff.
It makes the movie make not as much sense as it could have.
That's true. I mean, that's not to say that there wouldn't be maybe plenty of female Vulcans in Starfleet, but it's just awkward because we already had a main character female Vulcan, and she's just nowhere now. Where is she?
Yeah. The first time I saw that, I was horribly confused. So I was like, should I have seen this person before? But
I think at least 4 different actors play Spock in this movie. Maybe it's just 3. I think it's 4.
Yeah. He ages pretty rapidly.
This is a thing that we see in a lot of sci-fi TV, where you'll have some kind of contrivance for a rapidly aging child that keeps getting older and lives their whole life in the period of one episode of a TV show. We saw it in Smallville. We saw it in Birds of Prey. We've seen it in lots of different shows, and it's kind of fun to see it in a movie.
Yeah.
A lot earlier than that. So this just shows you how completely a total tough guy Kruge is.
Yeah. He doesn't want the other Klingon to shoot it. He wants to kill it with his bare hands.
You notice that, and I mean, I guess we have to credit Motion Picture for this, but they really never go far away from these Klingon costumes. Mm-hmm. Those are the uniforms in
that's
TNG.
Pretty much it.
I mean, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But they kind of stick with that. It's a good design.
Yeah. No, it's a good look for him.
So, I think this is as good of a time as any to bring this up. Sarah, I'm going to blow your mind with something I don't think you know.
Okay.
The original plot for this film was supposed to be drastically different. And the reason they went with this instead of that, I don't really know. And if anybody knows this, leave a comment, because I was doing some research earlier and I couldn't find it. But it might have just been simply a matter of this story sounded like it would have been too big to do in one movie. I don't know what the reasoning was exactly, but originally this film was supposed to feature the Romulans instead of the Klingons. And what it was going to be was Romulans come to the Genesis planet to mine dilithium. There's apparently a huge dilithium composite in the Genesis planet. The Romulans go down to investigate and find it. They didn't know about Genesis, so they discover Genesis. And the planet is doing what it's doing in this. It's changing, and they're like, oh my god, what's going on down here? And a rapidly aging Spock freaks out on them and kills them all.
Whoa.
And Vulcan finds out about this and gets angry that Starfleet was developing this horrible weapon without their knowledge, and they try to secede from the Federation.
That is weird.
That was originally the plan.
Yeah.
and they abandoned it for this film.
That's crazy, yeah.
So it was going to be a whole political thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been totally different.
It would have been totally different. And I don't know how you do all of the more intimate family stuff, friendship stuff in the middle of such a huge scoping political drama.
Yeah, maybe that's
why they changed it. Because
Yeah.
now that sounds just fascinating.
Yeah. I'd kind of like to read a script for that.
I think that could have been great.
Yeah.
And I mean, I buy everything about it.
Yeah.
You know, I buy the Vulcans because I mean that's actually a really good point. Like, Genesis was buried; nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
And it would have been really interesting if other planets didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because if
Federation members.
because
Yeah.
I guess they wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it was just a kind of a science project on its own.
Well, and something that Wrath of Khan brings up that is somewhat summarily dismissed after that because we didn't go with that plot is, aren't we playing God too much by doing this? Remember that McCoy was very against it, and the connotation that we're not thinking about past that is it's Starfleet doing this. Yeah. It's kind of the road to hell is paved with good intentions, the idea, the notion of they had good reasons for doing it, but they wanted to bury the fact that it's a weapon.
Yeah.
And that's why they kept it a secret. As long as the right people were doing it for the right reasons, nobody needed to know.
Yeah.
And so then you have questions about transparency, you have those you have those political questions that always arise with something like this, of should everybody know about it, or aren't we protecting everybody by not letting the bad guys find out that could get their hands on it?
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get the questions of what if down the road the wrong person's in charge and finds out about it.
We've been talking over a lot of stuff. We should probably talk about Pon Farr a minute.
Mm-hmm.
There is I think it is heavily implied that Sarek and the 15, 16-year-old looking Spock here probably have sex.
Yeah.
I think they have to.
Yeah, I don't see any other way around it. I think they do a good job of implying rather without going too far.
It's wonderfully, it's very tastefully done, and you look at Savik's face, and this is systematic for her.
Yeah.
Now, I think that she understands that it's an intimate thing, and I'm sure that in the back of her mind, she's probably thinking this is awkward. But she's very mature about it.
Yeah.
And I think I like her more because she's willing to do this.
Yeah. Well, because if she doesn't, Spock would probably die.
He would die. Yeah, that's the thing you have to remember about Pon Farr. Also, this is the last time that Pon Farr makes as much sense as it did in TOS.
Yes.
Everything after this, it gets really convoluted, and they make up all kinds of weird rules and biology about it. Here, it's exactly what it was before.
Yeah.
With the exception of, we're told in Amok Time that you have to go to Vulcan. And it's always been up in the air as to whether or not that's just because that's where the Vulcan girls are, that's where your mate is, or if you actually are physically supposed to be on the planet in order to mate. Now, I always thought that when Spock said, we have to go back to Vulcan in order to do this, that's just because more Vulcans are there than are on starships in random places. I always thought that was an isolated thing of my mate is there.
Yeah.
But some people, I've heard a lot of people say that they thought that the idea was supposed to be that you have to go to Vulcan in order for Pon Farr to even work.
Yeah. And see, I'm not sure I buy that just because...
Why?
Yeah,
no, I'm just saying, like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, what's so special about the planet itself, and could you even go very far in space? I mean, I know...
Yeah, only 7 years.
7 years.
That's a really good point. So he's asleep. She's sleeping right next to him. Really kind of get the sense that that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
But again, it's really tastefully done. I love how subtle that is.
Yeah.
And of course, he's going to be fine now with the Pon Farr. So I really feel like this is a good storytelling instance of giving the viewers credit and not having to tell them everything because it's pretty well implied.
Yeah.
You don't have to straight up state it. You don't have to show them doing anything. The fact that she says Pon Farr, and they touch, so you have a physical connection. That's good. That's important. We at least have that. And remember, by the way, that the touching of the fingers goes back to Journey to Babel.
Yeah.
That's what Sarek and Amanda Grayson did when they were together, and that denotes that denotes the physical connection of husband and wife, and seems to be a stand-in for public displays of affection.
Yes.
It's kind of reminding each other and reminding everyone that, yes, we have affection for each other, but we're Vulcans. We don't have to put it on display. Yeah. This is the closest we're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're subtle about everything.
Yeah. And that subtlety is really cool.
So anyway, I've heard people in a lot of other things say, with something really plot ambiguous that I feel like I really should know that a script is lazy about. Well, they're giving the audience credit. It could be anything. This isn't like that. This is a case of, I think we're told everything we need to know, and it's nice and subtle about it because it's a family film.
Yeah.
And not just that it's a family film. There are a lot of horror films and things where it's better for you to get to use your own imagination.
Yeah.
And if your head's in the gutter, it's almost, in some ways, in some things, it's almost worse.
If you don't get to see.
Yeah, because you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
And also, that's very consistent with TOS. Yeah. There are at least 2 or 3 instances in the original series where it is implied that Kirk has intercourse with someone, and we never see it.
Yeah.
So it's done very much like that show was. I feel like the pacing in this is a little closer to series.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's a little bit slower than Wrath of Khan, but it's certainly not motion picture.
No, and I think it's slower than Wrath of Khan because, I don't know, it almost has to be just with the material that we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's not a real huge, thickly plotted movie.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just saying I don't know how you'd make it any faster. I mean, you're not going to have a lot of action and space battles and stuff until you get to the end of this. Until you get actually really to where we're at now. A little more than halfway through.
Yeah.
When we finally meet up with the Klingons.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of character stuff you've got to do. I'm just saying that you could have gotten them into space a lot faster. But I think it's nice, again, to give all of our characters some stuff to do and to actually get to see them do all that and then get into space. I'm kind of actually glad that we spend time with them doing that, because not only is it kind of fun to get to see them do something that would otherwise be, like, really wrong and illegal, but, well, it is illegal, but also, and there's some suspense that builds there, too, but also because you always want to see your characters do impressive things.
Yeah.
And show off their skills.
Yeah.
And that's how they do that.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Telecams was a motion picture thing.
I don't remember either.
But that is the Klingon measurement of distance.
Yes.
And we hear that all over TNG and DS9.
Uh-huh.
Whenever you have a Klingon vessel, they'll say something Telecams.
And the death of the Targ.
The death of the Star Trek 3, the death of possibly a Targ.
Aw, and his tongue sticking out.
Is that the largest Targ we've ever seen?
Up to this point.
No, I mean after that. No, I don't think Targs ever get that big again.
It's hard to... The one that Q makes appear, it's really hard... Because it's kind of standing by itself. It's in the doorway.
Yeah, but you can... No, it's smaller. You can... With that... I can't believe we're talking about it. With that, they actually show you enough of it. Uh-huh. They back off on it a bit, and you can see it standing next to the divider thing that Worf stands next to. Uh-huh. And so there actually is something to scale it with.
Yeah.
No, it's smaller.
Okay.
I think it's like half the size of that one.
Yeah.
So, should we assume that Kruge, in order to honor his animal, probably cooks it and eats heart of Targ?
I don't know. He probably does.
Some great lighting in this scene. I love what's done with the smoke here, with McCoy standing back there. McCoy, by the way, importantly, is kept in shadow a lot. That's to continue this kind of mysteriousness of the Vulcan lore. Now, we know what's going on. I don't mean mysterious in that there's any mystery here to solve, but just the kind of mystical nature mystical-ish nature.
Yeah, of what's going on inside his head.
Yeah, exactly. And also to continually, he's not always in shadow, but when he is, I think that there's also a little bit of a sense of kind of like concealing who he is, like leaving it kind of ambiguous. It's like, is he McCoy? Is he Spock? Who is he right now?
Yeah.
And so anytime they have him in shadow, I think that's kind of the reason.
Uh-huh.
Christopher Lloyd would have been the last person I would have ever thought to cast as a Klingon.
I know, but he works so great. And I really like the strategy that's employed in this between Kirk and Kruge.
Yeah, explain it.
I mean, it's a cat and mouse, and Kirk has always relied on his intuition to outmaneuver his enemy. And Kruge is doing the same thing. He's a really good match for Kirk. And it harkens back to the first episode where we see Romulans with the Romulan commander, where they're playing cat and mouse all the way through. And Kirk had the same sort of relationship with Khan, where they were fighting. And it was just, trying to outmaneuver, figure out what the other person's going to do next, what they're hiding.
I also like that Kruge tries to take the moral high ground.
Uh-huh.
It's very amusing because he's just out to steal something for the Empire and to conquer, but he plays it up as, Kirk, you are an intergalactic terrorist. And I love that he says, he basically says, I'm validated in killing prisoners because they are against intergalactic peace, he says.
Uh-huh. It's kind of like what the move Tomalak always tries to pull on Picard.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, well, I'm not in the wrong, you're in the wrong here. You're not supposed to be here.
Yeah. Yes, if you're in a weak position, that's the thing to do. I'm the right person here. You're the one who has to move.
Yeah, and it's war always in the guise of diplomacy.
Yeah. Which is the most interesting kind.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because you have this kind of tete-a-tete thing, and you get to watch these, you get to watch these men, these leaders, trying to get what they want by under all these pretenses and things.
Yeah.
This is good stuff. And we have the same thing here that we had in Wrath of Khan, where the drama and the intensity doesn't come from people hitting each other or from really the space battles. Now, we will get a big drag-out knockdown fight with Kruge and Kirk later, but not until after the stakes are developed and they have a relationship. Mm-hmm. So we'll care a lot more about that fight than if they were to just, hit each other with swords for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, explain to me why you would open a Datog knife first.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I would figure that you'd stab somebody and then open it up while it's inside of them. But I
thought that was the point of knives like that.
Yeah.
That it was a weapon meant to inflict as much harm and pain as possible.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know this is gross, but what you do is you stab somebody with it, and then you press the button, and then it opens up, and then inside you have those two blades that furl out. And then you can be sure that you're getting every major artery or every major organ that you could possibly hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wondered about that myself, but
How do you feel about Shatner's performance here of "You Klingon bastard, you killed my son"? This is very important.
I think he does a good job with it. I don't think it's too over the top. I think he really conveys the emotion of it. I always laugh about him missing the chair, but I think it definitely works.
Yeah, that he's rendered this immobile and for a moment his faculties all fail him.
Yeah.
It's really sad. I also really like that Kruge doesn't know that's his son.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Yeah, not until
just now. And so Kirk is his tactics have failed him a bit because they're both concealing certain information. Mm-hmm. And that's the information that... Now, he might have killed him anyway. That might have been the reason he killed him.
Yeah, well, he was down on the planet. Kruge had said that he didn't care which they were going to kill.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, if Kirk had for some reason told him that was his son, it wouldn't have saved him.
Yeah, no, that's true.
We are Klingons. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like this is so very consistent with Klingons later on.
Yeah.
It's really cool to get to see the pre-treaty Klingons here.
Yeah. Well, and I think what was done with the Klingons in this is really the base, the foundation of what they built all the later Klingon stuff on. I think Kruge did so well here, and the performances were so good.
Lloyd, yeah.
Yeah, and I think just the stylistic stuff that was done with Klingons.
Would you agree that the Klingons that the way they're handled in this might be the biggest reason that you and I feel like this movie is kind of
Underrated?
Underrated?
Yeah.
It's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just love all the Klingon stuff in this movie.
And I'm going to make another case for it, too. I think that... And we haven't really criticized this movie much. I feel like maybe the biggest reason that it's not remembered as well is just that it is a slower film.
Yeah. That's
fair. But I think one of the other big things it has going for it is the Kirk, McCoy, and Spock triad thing. That's always at the heart of this. It's so cool that is present throughout, even though Spock doesn't show up until the end.
Yeah.
And, or at least Spock as we know him.
Yeah.
But he's there. His presence is always there.
Yeah.
And it's there physically, and it's there, it's there metaphorically.
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott here calls himself a commander. He's actually just been promoted to captain. But the only thing people can get from this is that, unless they just messed it up, is that maybe it's because he got promoted to captain to go to Excelsior, and the Enterprise's banks haven't been updated because the Enterprise was going to get mothballed.
I think I heard another theory on this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Where there can only be one captain on the ship, so Kirk is the captain. And so anyone else who has the rank of captain
is still commander.
Is still a commander, even though they could be the captain.
Yeah. So he has that rank. But he's not called by that rank.
Yeah.
Now, we had a destruct sequence in a TOS episode. Of course, it didn't actually blow up the ship. This is kind of the beginning of doing it a lot.
Yeah. But at least it happens in this.
That it actually happens.
Yeah,
You're right.
Normally you set the destruct sequence and then 1 second left and you turn it off.
This is another example of Kirk's great strategy.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that between this and Wrath of Khan, you get to keep seeing the ingenuity of Kirk. It's not just a matter of how well can you wield a gun or a sword or something.
It's using your wits to outsmart your opponent. And we're coming up to one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, I know you love this. Sarah quotes this all the time. This and Maltz Joel Yachu!
Yeah.
I am a big fan of the score. This is one of the themes that I like to go back to a lot. We don't get a whole lot of... Do we get very much of the Klingon theme from motion picture in this movie?
I don't remember, and I haven't been listening for it.
Yeah, I haven't just now been listening for it either. I don't remember. Yeah, this is great. Why is this guy such... Is this Maltz?
No.
There's another guy. Why is this guy such... Oh, no, it's not. Why is this guy such an idiot?
Get out of there!
Get out of there!
Oh, man.
I love the camera placement there in front of Kruge when he says that.
The guy flying over the console.
Yeah, and this is a gorgeous ship destruction.
Yeah.
So when Leonard Nimoy was and Harve Bennett were putting the story together, one of the reasons that they decided to have the Enterprise destroyed is because they knew they weren't going to have a big surprise that Spock is actually alive and comes back at the end, because it's inherently in the title of the film.
Yeah.
And somebody, by the way, asked Leonard Nimoy about that. By the way, sorry, let me stop for a second and say that this pan across is one of my favorite shots in all of Star Trek. that we get to see all of our, or most of our main characters looking up and watching the ship be destroyed, and they have been cast out of paradise.
Yeah.
And they are basically standing in purgatory now, and here in a little bit, Kirk will descend into hell. Love that stuff. But anyway, so, excuse me. So, Leonard Nimoy was asked by someone, something along the lines of, so I guess we can be pretty sure that Spock actually gets found in this movie, and that you're not teasing us with the title Search for Spock. And Leonard Nimoy's response was, okay, look, if we got to the end of the film and we had Kirk just shrug his shoulders, throw his arms in the air and say, well, sorry, we couldn't find him, and I'm quoting Leonard Nimoy directly, he says, verbatim, he says, they would have thrown rocks at the screen.
Yeah. No, that's hilarious.
I love that. But here's what happened. Nimoy and Bennett decided to, partly why they decided to have the ship explode was so they would have a surprise that nobody saw coming. And it's about, as I said earlier, it's about that loss, and it's about what you give up for your friend. So Kirk is making the most ultimate sacrifice he can make besides giving up his own life, which he's willing to do but doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Remember that Kirk always said things like, I already, like I forget what exactly the quote is, but something like, I already have a love, her name is the Enterprise. He always said things like that. I forget what the exact quote is. And so, I mean, like, if you think about it, that's a big sacrifice for Kirk.
Yeah.
And remember that the ship almost got mothballed at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Like, he's losing the biggest piece of himself, and now he's really losing it. But they wanted to do that so there would be a big surprise. And the destruction of the ship was in all the trailers.
What?
And Bennett and Nimoy were very distraught about it.
Oh, I bet. That's horrible.
Because they gave away their biggest surprise.
surprise.
And you'd think that would have hurt it, both somewhat, at least, if not commercially, critically. And it didn't. A lot of the criticisms of the film early on, there was a lot of... They even topped Wrath of Khan. It's very interesting. If you go back and look at a lot of the critics at the time, people were very impressed with the humanity of the story, with the themes of sacrifice, with how it builds so well on the last movie, and with the fact that it earns Spock's resurrection. And it's it's amazing how differently it's remembered now.
Yeah.
But except I don't think that it's remembered opposite from that. I think it's not remembered.
Yeah, I think people just forget about it.
Perhaps the comedy of four, both in a good way and a bad way, eclipsed this film.
Yeah.
Because Star Trek 4 was the highest grossing Star Trek film until First Contact, if memory serves.
Yeah.
And so I think what happened was 4 just eclipsed this, and 2 was not eclipsed because A, everybody remembers Khan as this great villain, and B, because... what they remember is Spock comes back and Spock starts to get his humanity back. What happens in the middle doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well,
when you think about it on those terms. And I think that's why that happened.
I think it gets lost between two very memorable films where you know exactly what happened in each of them, like you were saying. You know, you got Khan on the one hand and you got the hilarious movie about whales on the other hand. What's this movie about? Well, it's really kind of hard to put into one word.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Khan, whales, what's this?
Oh, you're right. What's the one word?
Yeah.
I think it's also really cool that Kruge suffers a lot of loss. That he has to make these huge sacrifices for what he's trying to get. And remember that he represents the wrong hands that we were trying to keep Genesis out of.
Yeah.
And so, again, there are these big implications that aren't really discussed that much about what Starfleet has potentially wrought on the universe.
Yeah.
There is a series of novels called, I think, the Genesis Wave, in TNG for TNG era. I've read a couple. They're very, very good. There's a lot of cool stuff about Geordie LaForge and Leah Brahms in that, and it deals with that stuff. It deals with the later repercussions of developing Genesis in the first place. this huge like energy wave that is created by, I think, another attempt at making Genesis again that goes across the universe and just destroys everything in its path, and kind of is a lot like the Nexus, except it destroys things.
And probably makes
There it
more
is!
sense than the...
Maltz Julia Chu!
I think it's really interesting that Kirk tries the same thing with Kruge that he did with Khan. Remember when he was trapped in the Genesis cave? And he was like, Khan, you're going to have to come down here.
That's right.
Well, here, he's like, Kruge, you're going to have to beam us up there.
Oh, that's great!
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
But Kruge won't do it, except this time, like they're proving Kruge's worth as an enemy to Kirk, that he's a good foil for Kirk because he doesn't fall for it.
Yeah, he doesn't... Well, he comes down here to fight Kirk.
Yeah. I think that as Klingons go, he is a... Give me Genesis!
Or give me death.
There was just a little bit of Doc Brown in that delivery. Give me Genesis!
Well, you know, if he pulls up those sleeves that he has, those black sleeves, you'll see all the watches.
Do you think that Kirk with... Because we've got a duel here. Do you think Kirk, with the outfit that he's in, with the white shirt, with the long sleeves and everything, that there's maybe a little bit of a throwback to Errol Flynn there?
Oh, could be.
Something like that.
I could see that.
Remember I mentioned earlier Kirk's descent into hell. This is very much an Inferno sort of situation.
Yeah.
Where he goes all the way to hell and back in order to save Spock, and I think that it really harkens back to Greek mythology.
Yeah.
In a metaphorical kind of way.
Yeah.
All of this lava stuff looks really good.
So my question is Kruge Cerebus, or would that be the Targ that died?
That would probably be the Targ that died. I think that Kruge is just generically the devil.
Yeah.
You know, he's just the thing that stands between Kirk and what he wants. And I think just represents evil in general, right?
Yeah.
Remember that Kirk has good intentions.
Yeah.
And he is only out for him and his own empire.
Yeah. But I think you're right, probably, in saying that he's just simply the thing that stands in his way between getting Spock back.
That's the thing that's most important, yeah.
And he climbs out with the sunrise.
Yeah, and of course that's your representation of hope. There is a way out. You know, he's able to go to hell, but it's not his time yet. Mm-hmm. And that's because he has something he has to do. And remember that a lot of the time in Greek mythology, when somebody goes to hell, it's to rescue someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think I'm reaching too far when I say that.
I don't think so. I think it lines up pretty well.
I'm sorry, the thing I was going to say earlier that I totally missed, that I didn't finish. Kirk, you do a good Kruge impression. I can see why he would actually buy that was Kruge saying that. But anyway, I think Kruge is a really good, worthy adversary for Kirk. And again, I think that he is not remembered the way he should be.
Yeah. Maltz, you've just been had.
Oh, Maltz. There's the Klingon symbol in the background there on
that panel
on the wall.
Yeah.
And the first place I've ever seen that was in the animated series. You see it 2 or 3 times in that show. And as far as I can tell, it was either made up for that, or it was made up during TOS and they just never put it anywhere. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the actual origin of the insignia is.
Yeah.
And I'd like to look that up at some point.
Now, how do we fly a Klingon ship?
Yeah, well, and you guys are going to have to practice a little while, because you're going to have to take it all the way back to the 80s here pretty soon.
At least it was already on. They didn't have to boot it from, cold start.
The destruction of Genesis looks great.
Yeah.
Very underrated, this film.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, that's the biggest thing that I take from this, again, watching it right now, is just Kruge, underrated. The human and the character stuff with how it builds on Wrath of Khan. It's not just resting on the laurels of the success of that film. It's building on all of those ideas. That's all very underrated. The one thing that is not underrated that people really do seem to remember this for is the competency and greatness. Competency isn't a strong enough word. The greatness of Leonard Nimoy's directing, which got him jobs after this. Leonard Nimoy directed 3 Men and a Baby, which is a comedy that you and I both like quite a bit. He didn't do a lot, but that was a commercial success.
Yeah.
And I think he's done a couple of other small things. I think they do a very good job. We haven't talked enough about Bones. I think they do a very good job of making Bones look just sickly in this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really bloodshot eyes, and he's sweating constantly.
Yeah. He seems
pale.
to look older. Yeah.
Yes. And when we see him in Voyage Home, he's not going to look that old.
Yeah.
And we find that McCoy's love for Spock is as great as Kirk's is.
Yeah.
And he almost needed to have his spirit inside of him in order to realize that.
Yeah.
But I think it would be easy to overlook that this is not just a story about Kirk and Spock. It's also a story about McCoy and Spock.
Yeah.
And and that, I think, is one of the great triumphs of this movie, is that it goes back to those ideas from TOS, and it reminds us that this was a story about these 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah, about the triad.
Look at Vulcan. It's gorgeous.
Wouldn't you love to live there?
It's just gorgeous. No, because it would be too hot.
Oh, I'd love it.
No, I know you would, but I'm not doing that. That would be terrible. You look at the lushness of retro thrusters. It's retro because they're in 1984. I look at Vulcan here, and I can't help but even be more sad that they blew it up.
I know.
In the recent stuff. I love the wardrobe for the Vulcans.
Yeah.
I love what Sarek is wearing. This stuff is just so alien. The ornamental stuff is always really interesting with the Vulcans. We never spend quite enough time on this planet.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that that's for the best, because
it keeps them mysterious, keeps them, and they're just such a ceremonial culture.
So this is really going to be the first time since a mock time that we've got to see any kind of a ceremony from the Vulcans. And I think that is very consistent with what they did there. And I think that they're using their production values to their fullest here.
Yeah.
You see this and you imagine, wow, what would a mock time have looked like on this budget? Because it's really the same kind of stuff. We've got the gong, like all the trappings are the same. And this new leader of Vulcan that's taken the place of T'Pau, she looks a lot like her. She's got the very same kind of wardrobe. But again, it's just... It's on this greater scale.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to see them go back to the earliest, days of Vulcan, because they kind of make a big deal out of, we don't do this kind of thing very often anymore. This doesn't happen. This is where we get the lineage of Sarek, child of Skan, child of Silkar. Important to note that what she means there is that Solkar was Skan's father, not that Solkar was like the name of his mother. It's Sarek, son of Skan. Skan is the son of Solkar.
Yeah.
I don't know why we go back 2 generations, but we go back 2 generations for some reason. Important to keep in mind that for Vulcans, 2 generations could be as much as 300-400 years.
Yeah. It's a long time.
There's McCoy, keeper of the Contra. Leonard H., son of David. So David McCoy. The only time we ever see him on screen is in a weird flashback conjured by Sybok in Star Trek V.
Yeah.
When McCoy could have saved him.
Yeah.
If he'd only had the knowledge that he would get a little bit later.
Yeah.
One of the only things that kind of works in that film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's very little.
But let me say that we're going to have a lot of fun when we go to 5. Because there's
yeah.
a lot to talk about with that movie.
And a lot to make fun of.
Absolutely. Do you know all the directors for the first 6 films?
No.
Okay, so it starts with Robert Wise, motion picture. Robert Wise directed also The Day the Earth Stood Still. And then it goes to Nicholas Meyer. And then it goes to Leonard Nimoy. Nimoy directed this one, and he directed 4.
Okay.
And then he had to direct himself.
5.
He had to direct himself a whole lot more in 4. That's one of the things that he talks about a lot as being a very difficult thing for him, was directing himself.
Because he had more to do.
Because he was in the movie more than
actually there.
Yeah. Star Trek V was directed by Shatner, and Star Trek 6 they went back to Nicholas Meyer, which is why there's so much reference to Wrath of Khan in that film, and to this. It goes back to the trilogy. And I said this when we talked about Wrath of Khan, but remember that The Undiscovered Country was originally what Nicholas Meyer wanted to call Wrath of Khan. Mm-hmm. He finally got his wish with that. All the way through this script, in order to avoid anything getting out to the public, I suppose, they wrote young Spock's name whenever he would show up in the script as Vulcan spelled backwards.
Oh, interesting.
And then he had his credit was as played by Frank Force. This is made up credit, and they credit Leonard Nimoy just as a joke in the closing credits of this as Frank Force, because he I think cameoed as the voice of some computer someplace, and so it's like voice of that computer, Frank Force.
Yeah.
This movie, I think, often does a really good job of having a lot of drama and a lot of emotion going on in scenes where nobody's saying anything.
Yeah. Yeah, because nothing's happening right now, but we're all in suspense.
Yeah, you're ensconced because it helps that it all just looks really, really cool.
Yeah.
There's some phenomenal production going on there. This looks great. We're establishing the crap out of that, but it looks great. That all
passes.
That all to me looked real.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not watching, we're talking about the matte painting of Vulcan, and it's not just a matte painting. You can tell that there's some. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how they did the foreground.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that could be a composited thing.
Yeah.
That could be a rear front projection thing, but I'm just talking about you can see things in the foreground and the background, so I'm assuming there's some projection. But anyway, note that the I don't remember her name, but the Vulcan, I don't know if she's just a priestess or if she actually is the leader of Vulcan, but she's being carried around in a chair, just like T'Pau was.
Yeah.
And I like that Sarek really spells it all out here, and not in an annoying sort of way. He reminds Kirk and the audience that of all the things that he's just sacrificed. And Kirk says, I did this because I had to. Now, we have seen other characters in other movies say that as an excuse to do crazy, nutso things.
Yeah.
I did it because I had to. Very often you'll hear heroes say, I was the person that had to go do this.
Yeah.
It's something I had to do. Picard says it in Nemesis, ironically. Picard, why do you have to go over to Shinzon's ship? Why can't someone else go? Why can't someone come over and help you? It's because it's something I have to do. But the movie hasn't earned that.
Yeah.
And you don't have that kind of relationship with him and Shinzon. It doesn't make any sense. Here, this is something Kirk has to do. You understand that? You appreciate that? And it's really driven home when he says, Sarek says, at what cost? And Kirk says, if I hadn't given up all those things, the cost would have been my soul. And what did he go to give Spock back? His soul.
Yeah.
My soul means nothing if I knew I could have restored my friend's soul to him, and I did nothing.
Yeah.
It's a case of personal responsibility, and it's not logical, and that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. Being human is not always to be logical.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that Sarek, who I'm sure really appreciate what Kirk has done, cannot begin to fathom why someone who was not of his family or anything would do such a thing.
Sacrifice that much.
Yeah, it's not logical.
Yeah.
A human father would understand.
Yeah.
A human father would look in his eyes and have recognition and say thank you. And would probably say something like, I am in your debt. And that would be it.
Yeah.
But not Sarek.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Harv Bennett, and Leonard Nimoy understand the Vulcans.
Yeah.
They get them. And
well, for the Vulcans, it's the needs of the many.
Yep.
Outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And Kirk does it backwards.
And that's what Kirk, and I think he even says that in the scene. Or perhaps it's in 4. I forget where that comes up, but there is a place where Kirk says where it's why did you do that, Kirk? And it's because the needs of the one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of rehashing the dialogue from Spock's death, and I feel like he's doing that here because it was his last memory.
Yeah.
And Kirk is the last thing he saw.
Yeah, he's trying to reorient himself.
I don't know where that dialogue is now, unless we talked over it and I missed it. I thought it was in this movie.
I think there's still a scene. It may be coming. I don't know.
No, this is it.
Okay.
I think we're done right after this, right?
Maybe so.
There is a major inconsistency in 4, and perhaps we should save this for that, but, we'll have a couple more hours, so we'll need to fill time. And the TOS theme here is so important. Partly because I don't know that we had it anywhere at all in the first 2.
Uh-huh.
I actually don't think that and that's just beautiful.
Yeah.
With that trumpet. It sounds wonderful. But anyway, so what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So Star Trek 4. You have this whole business throughout the whole movie of Spock is too Vulcan. He can't find his human side at all. And Kirk keeps trying to get him to say Jim. Uh-huh. The very last thing he does in this is say, your name is Jim.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can think of is it happens because of his Vulcan reprogramming. That whatever humanity he showed right then is like purged from him, I guess.
Yeah, I always thought that was weird too.
But I always thought that was a little bit strange, and even if there is a real reason for it, it seems like it's just an excuse for him to have to go through this whole character arc that he seems to not be that far behind at the end of this.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit strange.
Yeah. The
music for this film is James Horner, who didn't do a lot of these. In fact, I don't know if he did any more of these. I will look and make sure. I think this is the only Star Trek score he did. It's a great score.
Oh, yeah.
James Horner is known for lots of stuff. He also did the score for Avatar, and lots of other things. But really interestingly, he did the score for The Amazing Spider-Man, which is not a score I love. I might be in the minority there, but I think it's a little bit inconsistent. Interestingly, though, I mean, there's stuff in it I like, but there's just some places where the music is good, but I don't think it fits enough with what's going on. Anyway, but interestingly, his score for The Amazing Spider-Man in a number of places echoes this score, and especially if you listen, I think, to the closing credits, there's some stuff that is unmistakably Search for Spock.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm wrong. He did do Wrath of Khan. Maybe it was that more of Wrath of Khan was in that score.
Yeah.
For Amazing Spider-Man. Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, because now I'm thinking about it, it was some of the stuff with the lizard. Mm-hmm. Some of the lizard theme stuff. Yeah, I totally forgot that he did both this and Wrath of Khan. Well, that explains why it's as competent as it is.
Yeah.
And seems to connect up and echo Wrath of Khan pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, what else should we talk about while we're watching the credits here? Anything we didn't think to get to?
Well, we managed to cover a lot during the film. I was surprised at how many things we got through.
This is not a movie that I go back to a lot. I've certainly seen it a number of times, probably 15 or 20 times, but, I mean, I've been watching Star Trek my whole life, so that's not as much as it sounds.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that much. But anyway, this isn't one that I think to just put in on its own, and I think that is part of its downfall, and there's no way around it.
Yeah.
Is that this is not a movie that stands alone. This is a middle chapter, as we discussed.
Yeah. You almost want to put Wrath of Khan in before you put this in.
Yeah, well, you about have to,
yeah.
Because it kind of asks you to think about all that stuff,
yeah.
and the science fiction stuff in this, besides the Vulcan stuff, which is arguably, more mystical in nature than it is sciencey in nature.
Mm-hmm.
There's never really an explanation as to why the Vulcans are able to do what they can do mentally. I'm not saying that it's magic. I'm saying that it's never explained,
sure.
And so they're able to play it like a mystical thing, and that's one of the cool things about it. But besides the Vulcan stuff, it's still Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's still what we're playing with.
Yeah.
In the science fiction arena, and still the implications of playing God, that science, that kind of stuff, and making it kind of a disaster film.
Yeah.
In those moments.
Well, you get the volcanoes at the end.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny about it is that it's remembered as one of the not as thrilling ones, and we got a Kirk fight with a Klingon over a volcano. You don't get more TOS than that.
No.
I mean, I feel like, and you get the destruction of the Enterprise. I feel like this is in a lot of ways a TOS episode if you'd had this kind of budget.
Yeah, and 2 hours to tell it in.
Yeah, like the sorts of situations that they put the characters in are the sorts of situations that they would put them in TOS if they had been able to.
Yeah.
It's very much that kind of thing. Well, we're going to come back to you hopefully soon with a commentary for Star Trek 4, which should be a lot of fun. I am in the camp of Star Trek 4 is great. I really, really like Star Trek 4. But a lot of folks don't because they think that it's too silly, too campy.
I think it's silly. I think it's a good movie, but I think it's silly.
No, it definitely is silly, and we'll talk about all the reasons that is, and the reasons that the filmmakers felt like they had to make something lighter and fluffier And also the reason it was critically successful, because all of that is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And that is another one of those risks that could have not worked. And Leonard Nimoy talks a lot about risks taken, about doing things that are really brave and sound like bad ideas on paper, because he has the mentality that, frankly, I've always had with writing, which is you can make anything work, you just have to make it work.
Yeah.
And so he says, if you're committed and you believe in an idea that seems counterintuitive, a lot of the times those end up being the best ideas. He goes back to This Side of Paradise and says that this is where he learned that lesson. He thought that having Spock have a love story was a terrible idea because it ruins that character. It destroys what that character is about. And D.C. Fontana said, I'm going to do it. Wait and see what I have in mind. And he read the script and realized that it worked.
Yeah.
And that... And he says in interviews about Wrath of Khan in this movie that if you start from a place of this is a bad idea, it would never work, it's not going to work. Yeah. You have to be committed. And so he felt that way about the death of Spock, and he felt that way about the destruction of the Enterprise. Something else that I meant to mention earlier, and then we'll finish, is there's always been this misconception that Leonard Nimoy didn't want to play Spock anymore. And that it was hard to get him back for Wrath of Khan, and that part of the reason that he agreed to do that movie was so that he would never have to play the character again, which is not the case. Leonard Nimoy, in his interviews, says that that the reason he didn't want to come back after motion picture was because he didn't think that they knew what they were doing anymore. He claims that he never once said, I no longer want to play this character and I want to distance myself as far from Spock as I can. What he said was, I don't want to do this if we're not telling good stories. I don't want to do this if we're doing it wrong.
Fair enough.
And he said when he discovered that they wanted to kill Spock, that excited him and seemed like a potentially great idea. And that he agreed to, and that it was actually his idea to direct 3. And he agreed to keep doing them because he felt like they were back on course. And I love this. He said, I don't want to see a Star Trek movie that is good that I'm not in. It would make me sad. And I would be jealous. Yeah. And that's why he came back and did them.
Yeah, that's cool.
So anyway, everybody, thanks as always for listening. Really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back with you again soon for Voyage Home. Sarah, I had a great time watching this with you, and I appreciate you as always for doing it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'll be back with you again. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Sarah.
The